Hi folks, and welcome to another random platypus tutorial. This time we're going to be having a look at how to make yourself some wooden crates for your miniatures. So here's what we're going to aim to have at the end of this, which is a box made out of a load of coffee stirrers essentially. This is an alternative which we won't be looking at today, but it's just essentially the same thing but clad in cereal box cardboard. So they're the two types of boxes that I've been making for barricades and obstacles and things for various different games. We start off with some of your standard brown box cardboard, so moving boxes or packing boxes. I've cut this one to be roughly the size of a 28mm figure. It's quite a big crate, that's the idea. Now one layer on its own isn't going to be very thick, and as you can see is only about half the depth of this box. Now that's fine if you want to make smaller boxes or smaller crates, that's fantastic, but I'm going to double them up just so we have a bit more depth. It's going to allow me to show you how to make bigger crates essentially anyway, so it's good for demonstrating. And of course I have some already made. First thing we need to do is to take off the round edges of the coffee stirrer. As you can see, you don't really want that at the end. You make nice fencing with that. I've seen people make like picket fencing with it. But I'm just going to use a pair of kitchen scissors that I bought. They were cheap kitchen scissors I bought especially for this kind of thing. Obviously I would suggest you guys use a craft knife for more precision. I'm doing this for speed, which is the same reason why I will be using Uhu Glue in a moment. I'm doing all of my cuts with scissors today just because it's fast. And obviously I want you guys to be able to sort of build along. And hopefully you will be faster than me in this instance. But now I'm measuring out the coffee stirrers. I'm using the centimetre squares of my cutting mat to help me do that, because I'm not really caring about precision at this point, more is about demonstration. So if it's a little bit rough, I'm not going to be overly fussed. Again, it adds to the ruggedness. If you're looking at fantasy especially, then the guys would have been cutting these with saws and perhaps not so much with jigs. And like circular saws or buzz saws. So as you can see, I'm just making sure that it's the right length, which it is. Fantastic. I'm going to start with the side first, and as you'll see in a moment, it's just a case of a dollop of Uhu Glue and away you go. Again, I'm using Uhu Glue because it's fast and for the purposes of this video, but you could use any kind of white glue, so like a PVA or wood glue will do the same job. But again, I just want to be quick so you can see what I'm doing, and if you happen to make it along with me, then you probably already pre-cut everything. That's the best way to go. Cut all of the lengths of coffee stirrer, cut the size of box you want, and you can knock these out quite quickly. So yeah, just whack them on. Again, nothing wrong with using Uhu Glue first and then maybe giving it a coat of PVA afterwards even. But it does give you a little bit of play time to get things lined up in the right place and a little bit of flexibility. And also relatively quick, because as you can see I'm now onto the other side. Same process here, nothing new. Just make sure that nothing's too long or too short. If it's too short, stick it to one side because it will be useful for the short edges. As you'll see in a minute, I will be doing all of the long sort of sides of the crate first, and then I'll move on to the short sides. For that very reason, if you cut something too short, it can go up the short end of the box or crate. So as you can see, bosh, quite quick. Now again, if you're not really fussed about the accuracy, you can knock these out really fast. Using scissors, it's not going that far off screen. I've got quite an enclosed little work area, so it's just pinging off and hitting the side of that, or hitting my mug most likely. And then doesn't take long to just collect them all in. There you go. And it's just exactly the same thing again, just making sure they're the right length, nothing too long which you need to trim down, nothing too short which you can save for later. It's a bit annoying because nothing ever wants to sit where you want to put it for more than like a second. But it should give you an idea at this point of what it's going to look like. So as you can see, it starts to look like a crate. Great. So we just need to whack on the glue and go from there. Again, if you were batch making these parts to make these quickly, what I would do is cut all your cardboard first, as near as possible the right size that you want, and then I'd cut out all of the coffee stirrer parts, and then make sure you go through quality control at that point, and then just start gluing. Again, this is not hard. This is exactly what we've done on the sides. In fact, it's a bit easier because obviously there's a solid piece of cardboard underneath these, whereas the sides aren't quite as solid. Schoolboy error there, picked up a piece I didn't quality control. But who cares, right? We're getting a crate look, and at the end of it all, it won't really matter. It's going to be probably one of the crates I use towards the bottom of the stack. So that is something we need to consider for later on. The next thing we are moving on to is the short ends, and I'm cutting new ones because, as you can see, I have another crate to make with the long ones. So the longer pieces are already good. I've already sized them up, so I'll save them to use on the next crate. So again, first thing is take off the rounded edge. That's gone off somewhere, and these will equally probably shoot off screen. Oh, that one stayed there. That's good. And that one's it's quite hilarious thinking that you're wondering where these are going, and I'm having to gather them all back in. But anyhow, we are ready. We'll do the ends, and the ends are exactly the same as we've done on the sides. And there's way more details that you can add to these crates than I've bothered with. I'm just going with the basics, but if you make a smaller crate, you might want to add some twisted copper wire to represent like the wooden handles that some crates have. But we're just going box standard, get it? And bare minimal, because we're wanting barricades. We're not really interested in the individual crates looking amazing. We're looking at a stack, so details will be lost in amongst the stack of crates. There's no point really worrying about the individual look at this point. And also they're too big really to have, you're going to need probably poles or some form of carrying it that's not going to rely on a couple of rope handles. So again, the ends are a little bit more difficult than the top, but it all works. Probably could have made those a little longer. Anyway, so we'll skip forward, and what we've got is we're making the supports and essentially the cross beams that hold all the other planks in place. Now I made a sort of decision that I was going to do something a little bit experimental with this. I'm going to use cut up matchsticks to see how they work, and for this I'm going to use super glue again, purely because I want to do this quickly so that you can kind of see how it's going to look. Now I'll warn you now, I later decided that matchsticks are not the best for this, which is why I'm not going to advocate their use. They're a little bit too chunky, and they stick out a little bit too much. So whereas the box or the crate that I've already made is made using purely the coffee stirrers, this is obviously going to have the matchsticks as supports. Now if you're going to make them out of coffee stirrers, you need to cut the lengths that you want and then cut them down the width as well. So you're halving the width, because you want them to be small and not as wide as the actual planks themselves. Which is why matchsticks I thought would work really well. They're already that kind of size. You're not having to do a really delicate thing of cutting coffee stirrers down the middle, which can be a bit of a faff. You will definitely need a steel ruler and a craft knife for that. There's no way you can do that with scissors. But anyway, you can see me just super gluing these on. I wouldn't recommend normally using super glue, but Uhu Glue on fiddly bits is a bit messy. So yeah, you can see what we're doing there. That's how you would do it. You would do those in each corner and then a couple across the top. But again, like I said before, just think about how you're going to make your stack. There's no point doing all of this detail if you're not going to see it. If you're putting a box on top of a box, don't bother with the beams across the top. It helps them to sit flat. Nobody's really going to pay that close attention to it from a tabletop. You're looking down on it or you're looking at it from a distance. Nobody's going to point that it's not complete. Now again, if you're lining them up so there's one at the end of it like this, then again you don't want to put in those struts up the sides because you're not going to see them, especially once they're covered over a bit more. So yeah, it's just essentially what you're doing here is just thinking about how you're going to build your stack. you really don't want to go through the effort of putting all these little fiddly little details in, cutting coffee stirrers up, and essentially wasting materials when you're going to stack them. However, just for the giggles of it, I'm doing it so I'm not going to stack them, and as you can see, this is where I find that the matchsticks are too chunky. Far too chunky. They stick up too much. What I actually did at a later date, which is what you'll see in the photos, is trim them down with a hobby knife. Now, another thing I sometimes do for added detail, which is really quick, is I've got this old end of a dart, and it's really good for a point. And if you put in indents in where you would think the nails or tacks go to hold it all together, it at least gives that impression of the nails being there. You could potentially just leave the crates as they are as the coffee stirrers, because it's wood and you don't need to paint them, but if you chose to paint them, you know, just chuck a wash over those indentations and it looks like nails. Now, looking a bit more closely at the cardboard one, which we're not going to do today, but if enough people want me to, I can show you. It's just the same thing. Instead of cutting up coffee stirrers, you make one panel for either side and top, and ends for your crate, and then you just cut small lengths of cardboard to represent the supports around the outside. It's not complicated, and it's probably more self-explanatory than doing a coffee stirrer crate, but again, I'm just pointing out here the difference of using the coffee stirrers again instead of the matchsticks, because it looks way better and it looks neater, strangely, as well. So yeah, this is essentially where you want to get to, and you want to repeat this process until you have enough to build a crate. Now, just a quick word, if you wanted to do fancy, don't. You're wasting your time. You're better off going to Fenris Games, where I got this one from, and you can buy a bag, and they're so cheap, it's just not worth your time trying to replicate them. You know, if you're just wanting something quick and rudimentary, then throwing these crates together is fine, but do think about how much time you're going to spend and how much detail you want, because there's going to be something way better out there that isn't going to cost you an entire afternoon to try and make 3 of. So like I say, you know, think about how much your time is worth, even at minimum wage, and then go and buy a packet of these from Fenris Games. There's more options as well, you know, far more variety than you could probably knock up in the same amount of time it would take you to make individuals. So with that in mind, it's time to sign off. If you've got any requests for any more tutorials, just let me know. Bye bye now.